She thought it was just another trip. Routine security checks, crowded lines, the hum of travelers rushing to their gates. But in a split second, everything turned sinister. Her passport, the symbol of freedom and identity, was snatched from her hands and thrown into flames by those sworn to uphold the law. Laughter turned to silence as smoke curled into the air. The officers thought they were in control until they discovered the truth about who she was. And in that moment, their power began to crumble. Before we dive in, drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far stories like this reach. And if this one resonates with you, be sure to subscribe. The following story might be yours. The IT was supposed to be the start of an ordinary journey. She had planned the trip for weeks, meticulously organizing her documents, double-checking her luggage, and arriving early at the airport to avoid any last-minute rush. To her, travel wasn't just movement from one place to another. It was a reminder of freedom, opportunity, and the sacrifices her family had made to give her that life. The terminal buzzed with its usual rhythm. Families huddled together with their bags, business travelers glued to their phones, children tugging on their parents' sleeves. She blended seamlessly into the crowd, her passport tucked neatly into her hand, her boarding pass folded just so. There was nothing unusual about her presence, nothing threatening, nothing to draw unwanted attention. But in a society where skin color could dictate perception, the simplest act of boarding a plane could transform into a gauntlet. She knew the looks, the subtle whispers, the random checks that were anything but random. She had endured them before, but today felt different. The stares lingered longer. The officers at the checkpoint didn't just glance at her documents. They scrutinized them, scrutinized her as though searching for a reason to strip her dignity away. She took a steady breath, determined not to let the weight of their gaze shatter her calm. But even as she tried to steady herself, something inside warned her. This time would not be like the others. This time the line between inconvenience and violation would be crossed. And what awaited her on the other side of that checkpoint would change not only her life, but the lives of those who dare to stand in her way. The line inched forward, each traveler passing through with little more than a glance and a stamp. But when it was her turn, the air shifted. The officer took her passport with a deliberate slowness, holding it longer than necessary, flipping through the pages as though searching for invisible faults. His eyes narrowed, not at the ink on the paper, but at the woman standing before him. She offered a polite smile, but his expression hardened. He signaled to another officer, then another. Within seconds, what had been a simple process became an interrogation without words. Passengers behind her exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered, others turned away, unwilling to watch what they knew was about to unfold. The second officer snatched the passport from his colleague and examined it with exaggerated suspicion. Counterfeit, he muttered loudly enough for others to hear. The word hung in the air like poison. A murmur rippled through the line, and suddenly she wasn't a traveler anymore. She was a suspect. She protested silently with her posture, her calm, the unshaken clarity in her eyes. But the officers weren't looking for truth. They were looking for a show of power. One of them smirked, lifted the passport for all to see, and with a chilling casualness, tossed it into a nearby trash bin where a small security incinerator waited to dispose of confiscated items. The blue cover curled and blackened in the flame, its gold insignia disappearing in seconds. The smell of burning paper filled the checkpoint. A hush swept over the crowd. She felt the heat rise to her cheeks, not from the fire, but from the raw humiliation. Her identity, her freedom, her dignity. It was all symbolized in that document. And now it was gone. The officers laughed under their breath, congratulating themselves as if they had just protected their country from some invisible threat. But beneath their arrogance was a deep fragility, because while they believed they had reduced her to nothing, they had no idea who she truly was. She carried no badge, no uniform, no visible authority. But her name, her position, her connections, those were more powerful than anything they could imagine. She stood silently, refusing to give them the satisfaction of breaking. The onlookers shifted uncomfortably, some raising their phones, recording the injustice as it unfolded. The officers noticed but didn't care. Arrogance made them blind. For her, every second stretched into eternity. Rage simmered in her chest, but she held it down. She knew the truth. Their moment of power would not last. And when the truth surfaced, when they realized who they had just violated, their laughter would turn to silence, their bravado to fear. The fire had taken her passport, but it had also lit a spark they could not control. The crowd at the checkpoint had grown restless. Phones were raised higher now, the quiet buzz of recordings spreading like wildfire. The officers who moments ago strutted with confidence now shifted uneasily, sensing that something was beginning to slip from their control. But they still didn't know just how deep their mistake ran. She stood motionless, her breathing steady, her silence louder than any protest. To them, it was defiance. To her, it was patience. Because she knew the moment of reckoning was approaching, that a supervisor was called over, his face tight with irritation at the delay. He barked at her to produce identification, his tone dripping with disdain. She lifted her chin, her eyes sharp, and calmly gave her name, Althea Vance. Just her name. The reaction was immediate. The supervisor's face drained of color. He repeated it quietly at first, then again louder, as though he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. The weight of recognition hit him like a blow. Whispers rippled among the staff. One of the younger officers pulled out his phone, quickly searching, his eyes widening as confirmation glared back at him from the screen. This wasn't just any traveler. The flame consumed the passport swiftly, the blue cover curling into ash, its golden insignia erased in seconds. A hush spread through the checkpoint as the acrid smell of burning paper lingered. Her cheeks flushed, not from the fire's heat, but from humiliation. That small book represented her identity, her dignity, her freedom. Now it was gone. The officers exchanged smirks, congratulating themselves as if they had neutralized a threat. Their arrogance was bold, but fragile. They believed they had reduced her to nothing. What they didn't know was who she truly was. She wore no badge, no uniform, no symbol of authority. Yet her name, her position, her ties, those held more power than anything they could imagine. She remained silent, unbroken, refusing to bow. Around her, the crowd stirred, phones lifted higher, screens glowing as the injustice was recorded. The officers noticed but ignored it, blinded by their own pride. Each second stretched, rage pressing at her chest. But she kept her calm. Their triumph was short-lived. She knew when the truth surfaced, their laughter would dissolve into silence, their boldness into fear. They had destroyed her passport, but in doing so, they had sparked a fire they could not extinguish. Then came the supervisor, irritation etched on his face. He barked orders, demanded identification, his tone dripping with disdain. She raised her chin, eyes steady, and spoke with calm precision, Althea Vance. The effect was immediate. The supervisor froze, repeating the name quietly, then louder, as though confirming the impossible. Whispers spread like ripples. A younger officer quickly searched his phone, his expression shifting to shock. The truth stared back at him. This was Althea Vance, renowned philanthropist, founder of the Vance Foundation, the very institution that had funded this airport's security upgrades. And more, she was sister to Senator Adrian Vance, tireless champion of justice, a powerful voice on the committee overseeing airport security itself. Panic replaced arrogance. Their smug confidence crumbled into frantic whispers and pale faces. The supervisor's voice cracked as he ordered them to step back. But it was far too late. The act had been witnessed, burned into memory, and captured on dozens of screens. The enforcers of the law had shredded it before the public. Finally, she spoke again. Her voice carried no anger, only a cold, measured calm that struck deeper than fury ever could. Do you know what you've just done? Silence fell. In that moment, they understood the weight of their mistake. The crowd pressed closer, whispers rising, the spark of outrage spreading. The officers had believed themselves untouchable. Now, with the truth unveiled, They stood exposed, trapped in a fire of their own make.